Hello, Thought Roomies. This week on The Thought Room, I sat down with Cyrus Sutton. Cyrus is a professional surfer, a filmmaker, an environmentalist, and a co-founder of a reef-safe organic sunscreen brand called Manda. So Cyrus made his first film called Riding Waves at 19 years old, covering the then amateur surfer Dane Reynolds. By 23, Cyrus had won the Southwest Regional Emmy for his next film, The Next Wave, a tsunami relief story. Since then, Cyrus has written and directed many feature-length films and has completed projects for some major clients such as Patagonia, Dr. Bronners, Adidas, GoPro, and Teva. His projects have been featured in the New York Times, Scientific American, Condé Nast, and the Huffington Post. So when I met Cyrus, he was touring around North America with the yerba mate brand Guayaki, and his film, I Am This, was popping up and being projected on the inside of a geodesic dome in backyards and breweries and bars and hostels all across the country. Cyrus creates these incredible social and environmental impact films. I first stumbled upon Cyrus's work in Austin, Texas, when my friend Eric Godsey and I went to watch this experiential nature film that was set up in this geodesic dome, which it's kind of like a mobile planetarium. So you crawl into this dome, and the entire inside of the dome is a screen, and the film is projected up onto the inside of this dome, and it's produced that way so that your entire peripheral field is just filled with the picture. And so you're lying on your back and you get these amazing panoramic nature shots that are just melting into these fractal patterns, and it was set to this gorgeous music with Ram Dass's voice in the background. I was so impacted by this film and the experience of it that I crawled out of that dome, and I was so determined to find the artist behind it. Luckily, I did. And so here it is, my interview with one of the most down-to-earth and creative people that I've ever met, Cyrus Sutton. Cyrus Sutton, welcome to the Thought Room. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for joining me today. We are recording from my apartment in Brooklyn, and you and I met in April in Austin, Texas. So you are a filmmaker amongst many other things, and we actually met at an event where you were showing a film of yours in this radical geodesic dome. And I remember after I saw your film, I was just like, this is really powerful. And I went out and I was kind of fangirling to the girls there that were setting up the event, and they were like, oh, the filmmaker's here. And I knew I needed to meet you. So that was how we met.
Wow. Yeah, that was that was an awesome time. Austin, I've never been there for an extended period of time. And yeah, it was great to meet you there. And it's neat to see you here in New York.
Yeah.
I haven't spent much time in New York, so this is a good trip. And you live here, how long have you been here?
I've been here, 4 years probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, but all of my friends know I'm a little bit of a tumbleweed. It's kind of a joke amongst them because people will just start their texts off by, are you actually here right now or not? Like, are you in New York? Should I invite you to this? So yeah, hence why I was, in Austin for the month when when we met. But you're here because your film is essentially on tour. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. It's called I Am This. It's a sort of an experimental nature film. I've made films for the last 15 years, and it seemed like over the years they've gotten more and more on tiny screens and in a feed and one-dimensional or two-dimensional. And I've wanted to explore experiential pieces. I mean, when I first started making films, I made surf films, and it was capturing the best waves, the best surfers, and the best days of the year. And it was an event for people to come out to this theater and watch it. And it was a communal experience. The energy in the room was palpable. It was a gathering place. It was a focal point, and the film was a conduit for that energy. And I wanted to explore how to recreate something like that. I mean, I feel like the challenge as an artist is always to break through our jadedness and what we've the patterns we've created that make something common and us not pay attention. And back at that time in 2003, when my first surf film came out, there was like a handful of surf films a year. It was still something to be celebrated and something to go to. And now it seems like video content is so ubiquitous that, how am I going to punch through that? How am I going to make people feel something again? And because that's why I started filmmaking. So we found this, mobile planetarium geodesic dome, and I've been relearning filmmaking for the medium. And the gist of it is you lay on your back, and the dome's small and intimate, so it's like 15 to 20 people. It becomes a real cuddle puddle of 20 people, and you're all laying on your back, heart open, facing straight up, and getting this. And the acoustics of the dome are pretty surround sounding, and you're looking at this experience that fills your entire field of vision, and just the medium itself is powerful. So the content tries to emulate that and evoke deeper emotions, and whatever you're feeling, everybody in the room is feeling. So it's a pretty cool. I mean, people have called it like communal VR, which it isn't, but it feels like that because you don't have any other perception. Even when you're in a movie theater and you're looking up at a screen, you're looking at a rectangle and the backs of people's heads and the ceiling. Everything you're looking at is these moving images. So the goal was to create something that was, as few like motion graphics as possible, as few computer generated graphics, and to make everything as organic as I could. And it's a work in progress. I'm going to just keep continuing to make it better at each stop. And yeah.
I remember when I came to see it, I had brought Eric Godsey, my friend from Austin. And we, at that time, because I know you've done a lot of little tweaks on it, and I'm excited to see it again this week. But at that time you had these Ram Dass voiceovers and this beautiful, immersive nature imagery. I mean, it's hard to describe, but I remember this, this chameleon's eye melting into something else, and beautiful, like concentric circles of some wood grain, and just the juxtaposition of these beautiful snapshots of nature done in a way that there was just like an embodiment or a felt sense that was left inside of that dome that was numinous. You just have this sense of that was really sacred. I don't even know why I'm feeling this way, but I suddenly feel blessed or grateful. And that's what I exited out of that dome feeling. So I can definitely see why you like the medium. I think it's an incredibly powerful one, and I think that you're doing it really well. So I'm so happy to have you here to be talking about it to people. But you mentioned, so going back to your surf film, I believe I read that were you 23 when you, or how old were you when you did that first surf film?
I was 19.
You were 19.
Yeah, it was one of those moments where I just, like, life became clear. I mean, I've been fortunate to where I knew what I knew what I wanted to do for the rest of my life when I was like 18. I mean, it just hit me. It felt like I was possessed by another spirit or something. and all I could think about was making this surf film. And I devoted I devoted the next couple of years to making it and touring it, and it ended up doing incredibly well beyond like that manifestation of whatever that came down through was so powerful. It kind of scared me, but I've been doing the same thing ever since, and it was really, really fun. And it's been to varying degrees of success, and I've had all kinds of failures from there. But it was. I started young.
When you were doing it, did you just have this sense of this is going to work? Like this internal, like what was driving you forward? I mean, you talk about this other thing inside of you, just knowing that you had to do it. But was there any question in your mind that it was going to be successful or not? Or did that even matter to you at the time?
I think it probably did. I think I needed it to happen at that time because of my circumstance growing up. And I was just not willing to, my whole family were college professors, so I didn't want to go to college. I guess you don't want to be what your parents are. And then I also didn't want all of the examples around me of the vocations and like what people were doing didn't have any interest. And I also knew that I had to do something well and make a career at a young age. And but overall, it was this deep inspiration, like that whatever fear there was that was sharpening really came in this form. Like it was a very loving fear, and it was a very inspiring fear to the point where I just, there wasn't a lot of room for doubt. And honestly, the purity that came at that time, I don't know if I've duplicated to that level of purity. I think, life, and I've probably gotten jaded or too used to, what that initial feeling was. Maybe I'd never felt that as a kid. But that was, I think it's an interesting thing about art is that a lot of times your first thing that you do has a magic to it because there's been like all this built up subconscious that hasn't been released yet. And I find that something that I try to do actually was take time off and not do things so that builds up again. I think it's like, that's like a converse to the 10,000 hours and just the practice. I think it's both.
Wow. Yeah, there's kind of this dance with it, this ebb and flow. What you were saying actually reminded me of first relationships. How like your first love is just like this intense experience. And a lot of people spend their lives just almost chasing to get back to that expansive love that they felt like when they had that first relationship. And along that same vein, it's like, we all know it's healthy to take breaks between relationships, right? Like we're told, take some time to be single. I think it's the same with art. From what I hear you saying, it's like really good to let those creative juices kind of just replenish themselves a little bit and make sure that we're in our integrity when we step into the next creation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much time. I feel like that resonates a lot. I think that both relationships and art are very similar in that we find muses in life, and whether it's like through another person or it's through this ethereal, dance in your dreams with your mind, it comes under certain conditions. And I think that we can wear that out by trying to tap it too hard and try to have too much of it. And it can become addicting to want to have that feeling all the time. But without those ebbs, you don't get those flows for sure.
Wow. Yeah, it definitely sounds like you've done a lot of work unpacking that piece, because I think a lot of artists really struggle with that dance of productivity and the creativity and the muse. And, I myself have read so many books on it, from The Artist's Way to The War of Art and Catching the Big Fish, and kind of all of these tools to help me stay in that creative space. How it was, is there anything along those lines of tools that over time you've either read about or you've developed to just help you not attach so much when you're not in a place of flow?
Absolutely. Yeah. I really like the artist way. And the war of art really spoke to me as well. Especially that idea of the muse. I mean, it just kind of put a word for what I felt like I was already intuitively doing. I think along the way, I've gotten to the only thing that's changed. I think we're pattern readers, and we make art. Like, life is art, in every way, whether it's like the stock market or whatever it is. You're pattern reading, and you're extrapolating from that, and you're trying to create a beautiful cathedral of, whether it's systems or, it's painting blobs on a paper, or blobs on a canvas. It's all expression, and that's what drives the future. Something is creating new patterns. So I think that the only thing I've really learned is to ride those ups and downs with less attachment to the feeling of it, and trying to stay stuck in the ebb or the flow. I think that's, but I don't think I think we're just born with certain gifts, and certain people have certain knacks for things. And the more we can accept that humbly and like work within that, and hopefully it feels inspiring to us I guess it's hard. I have a lot of friends who are inspired, don't feel like their gifts match where they're inspired. And I think that the answer to all that for me has been, and because there's parts of my life, like, honestly, I'm doing a lot right now, but I feel like I'm the most lost that I've ever been. And I'd say that the things I'm inspired by are less aligned with what my gifts have been. So, but again, it's always a challenge, right? It's always, life is that like unfolding challenge about pushing up against uncomfort. And it seems like life will always give us that uncomfort, whether it's rendered by our own jadedness and desire to change things up, or not. And there are, I think, more stable people in the world that don't look for those highs and lows and those those pinnacles of expression to share, and that probably have less of what we're talking about. But in terms of, trying to create, like, distill life into something that can be shared, it can tend to be embracing that, up and down.
Very well said. Very well said. I relate to that as well. Finding the most inspiration in my times of being down. And, I had a really rough time last fall. And I remember some friends in particular really being concerned about me and where I was at, and saying, you really need to go talk to this friend, or you really should get out more. And I kind of was just like, please don't rush me in my process. Please don't will me out of my sadness, because I want to be here right now. I know there's some gold underneath here. And sometimes people in our lives, they have the best of intentions because they love us. But what's really occurring is they are uncomfortable themselves witnessing someone they love be in that discomfort we're talking about. So what
true.
they're actually doing is like pushing and grasping so that their reality can be more comfortable. Because if someone they love is in jeopardy, then that essentially is a big old question mark in their life. Like, what's going to happen to that person? Now their security is unstable in a way, their foundation. So, but for me, sitting in it and being like, okay, I feel this way. It's ugly. It's hard to look at, but with a lightness and a curiosity, kind of just like, okay, sadness, I don't want you to stay here, but you can be here for now, as long as we do the work. You can hang out here as long as you need until this moves through naturally, but you may not stay permanently. You're not setting up shop in me. And that was a really important distinguishment I made this time versus the other I don't know, dances with depression I had experienced in my life, where I was just completely forlorn and woe begone, and nothing was going to shake me out of it because nothing could. It was like, oh. But this time it was like, okay, I see you. Here's your space, but we're not staying. And that was really powerful.
Yeah.
Realization.
That sounds intense. I mean, I think that the beauty of that and the beauty of allowing yourself and not marginalizing it or criticizing it within yourself is that you're giving that space for that thing to beautifully unfold in its own time. And what I've found that really helps is to be of service in that time to other people and other things. And that is what I think, is really lacking in our society in general, is especially in America right now, is this like idea of, and it's not a problem. It's not our own problems. It's a lot of the pressure that we feel like we have to be this thing and do this thing in this like personal brand building age of social media. I think it's a very self-focused entrepreneurial, jobs are lasting short, they're the shortest lived in history of, how quickly in America, like we're going from job to job. I don't know if that's accurate. Maybe in the 30s or in the Depression, people switched jobs quicker, but I think vocation wise, like we're more fluid and we have to wear many hats. And I think that creates a level of anxiety and a level of needing to circumvent our waves and our patterns of what we're doing. And the trick of the artist is to tap into that. But I think if we can in general look at those down times as being times where we, even if it hurts and it's hard to like give of ourselves, even if that means sharing with friends who are concerned, it feels like a real nice time to be selfless and out of ourselves. And then use for me it has, to then come back into my body when I'm feeling strong and be like, okay, my ego's back, my engine's back, I feel good about myself. Now I'm going to go do things that's self-directed, and other people can come on and I can bring them on, but it's a different kind of energy. And I think that a lot of the stuff we see surrounded by social media or this world is people in that space. And that's what we celebrate. And there's a whole other side that makes that possible, that every one of those people that do those yang kind of moves, they're all also in the shadows doing their yin work that is not being shared that much.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much guilt around taking that space and doing the yin thing and relaxing. And I hear it over and over and over with my friends who are musicians and artists and creators and writers. When they're not in the flow, there's this question, and maybe you have thoughts on this, but you meet resistance. You're not feeling like you're in flow with your art. You have the desire to just go do something else, and you're feeling guilty about not working now, and it's creating this situation. What do we do? I mean, what do you push through resistance, and do you sit down every day to just work anyway, even if you're not in the flow? Or are there times where it's really better to just say, I'm going to go for a walk and get an ice cream cone, and I'm not going to feel bad about it, So I think people are kind of trying to find that sweet spot, and I wondered if you had any wisdom on that front.
I mean, I can only speak for myself, and I think that those times are just balancing times. So I think people who experience, and probably a lot of people listening to this may or may not resonate with what we're talking about, because and probably more so, yes, because there are also people who are pushing themselves to put out as much as they can and to be as on, and people who are doing self-improvement and soul searching are generally wringing out as much as they have others of creativity or whatever it is in themselves, and are thus coming up against these darker times, because it's like the dark matter, and the invisible that we can't see. But for me, it's I tend to things that I don't do in the times that I'm on. So when I'm really feeling like my self-assigned important work, which is completely arbitrary, is sitting down and writing out treatments, or writing, or drawing up storyboards for future films or ideas, or reading and researching and taking notes, or editing, putting finishing touches on things, or learning about a new camera process. And those are times when I feel this like palpable inspiration. And then those are times that I tend to neglect connections. I tend to not call my friends. I tend to not answer work emails as promptly. And in the times when I'm feeling kind of off or down, it's more physical, where I go and take care of the things that I would say do not serve the pinnacle of my art, or what I've seen in the pattern of my life, creating the most tangible abundance. But I'm kind of taking care of all the other stuff. And I think that's a pretty good flow that I've gotten into, that I maybe didn't have when I was younger, where I get way more practical, and I just I'm on 4 acres. So there's a lot of chores around the house. And there's just a lot of, weed whacking and gardening and kind of stuff. And then there's a lot of, so there's that. And then there's just work stuff. I have like three different jobs, and a lot of those are just getting back and corresponding with people and having meetings. And it doesn't take that much mental clarity or power or focus that I have when I'm in those, really creative spaces. And that pulls me out of getting too much in my own head, because there's just always something to do, but there's different things to do.
Yeah. Amazing. I was just thinking about how you said you have 3 different jobs, and in my head, kind of just picturing from what I know of you, what the trajectory has been like for you. And, you had this surf film at 19, and then weren't you either nominated or won some kind of regional, like Southwest Emmy?
Yeah, when I was 23, I was a part of a production that documented the tsunami that was in 2004, 2005 in Southeast Asia, that hit Thailand and Banda Aceh and all that. And we went, and the gist of the film, it was a 60-minute topical documentary. It aired on Fox Fuel TV, which was this kind of action sport TV channel. And it was basically just like we came there to with this Doctors Without Borders sort of model, and we just found that these people were way more resilient than we were, and they actually taught us about that. And one of those like challenging the white man savior ideas. So
So okay, so first film at 19, you win this award at 23, this prestigious award. What are you left thinking about your life and feeling at that point? Because so many people, that's the kind of thing they aspire to they hope at the pinnacle of their career they could achieve something like that. And here you are in your early 20s doing this. And the question is, what next? What are you feeling at that point?
Yeah. After the first surf film, I think I was sitting in bed when I was 20. And my first surf film was crazy because I didn't really want that. I was a pretty simple kid. I was just obsessed with surfing. From every day, from 14, twice a day, I would probably 2 to 3 hours a day, 2 to 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a day I was surfing. That and going to school. And I was able to have all the heroes, all the guys' posters on my wall were in my film. And the film, it was like the second or third best-selling surf film in the world, and it was just this, and I'd never picked up a camera really before making the film. Taught myself how to edit and making it. And I remember being incredibly depressed, at 20. I actually spiraled into like a really deep depression because I was like, I had gotten everything I could have ever dreamed of. And then I remember waking up being like, what's the point? And I think I channeled a lot of anxiety and depression into the work to do it. And I think I had never dealt with that. And so all that kind of came crashing in, was like, okay, I'm still sitting in this space and I've made this deal with myself that like if I did this whole thing, my life would be different, and I'm still the same, and I'm still sitting here. So I think that's taught me, and I'm still learning this lesson, that if I'm in a dark space, I can't just masochistically work in order for that to be a solution. I think one of the main, and it's becoming more and more for women, but the main paradigms for men, especially in America, has been bottle up all of, any pain that you ever have and shut up and work really hard and gain status and money and power, and then you'll be able to do whatever you want. And that's like, nobody really, people talk about that as like toxic masculinity or whatever it is, but it's such a motivator for so many guys. And I think that was probably one of the first attempts that I had at that. Like if I could think of what would give me, my avatar self, like that superpower or whatever that is, it was to making this film. And so yeah, it was like the first time I saw the illusion in that. And I've, like a lot of patterns, I continued to do it until until now. And then it's just gotten to be less and less, to the point of stillness, of ego in that regard, but still at this point trying to figure out, okay, if I don't have that same motivation, or if I'm not going to bottle up things that I interpret as pain, because right, like it's all about our interpretations. And so if you're really sensitive about shit, then you get hurt really easily or whatever, and then you can bottle it up really easily, and then you can be really prolific, and I think a lot of guys, that's what they do. I think a lot of guys are incredibly sensitive, and we don't have the tools to deal with and the resiliency to deal with grace with things and just kind of let them ride out. And we tend to, put that into our work, and then society sees it and holds those men, a lot of men like that, up. And a lot of times the people that we hear about and that are on the things are some of the most damaged, and that's beautiful. It's all part of the journey. But yeah, I think looking at that as a culture is probably pretty important. And for me, my culture, with that's going on inside of myself and my map of reality, that feels like something that is what I'm working on now. It's just like, how do I move forward, and how do I make things in service of my highest truths, and where am I stepping out of that, and how is that creating more of this cycle of outward success and inward potential, continuing to strive, as opposed to just surrendering and like letting things come in more and more. So it's a gradual process. Now I'm 36, so it's been quite a few years of practicing that.
Wow. This really resonates what you're saying about the masculine and the feminine and these energies and how they're at play in the world right now, coming in and out of balance all of the time, mostly out of balance, but I think we're working on it collectively. I feel like when it comes to women and their perception, their choosing of men on the whole, there's these at least two camps forming. There's one that's feeling a little bit like, toxic masculinity, and there's a hook into words like oppression and the Me Too movement, and there's a lot of anger there, and rightly so, and in some ways. And then there's this other camp, which I think that I'm more drawn to, which is like, yeah, this is happening. Women are in pain, but like men are in pain too. And it's a very confusing time to be a man. And for me as a woman, I want to know, what are the small ways in which I can support the men in my life to flower into the manifestation of their most sacred masculine in a way that they're not feeling shamed or blamed, or that they're the root of the problem. Because in my opinion, I've very rarely in history seen that work, where we do the finger wagging thing and the person says, oh yeah, you're right. I've been doing that. No, it's like we have to meet each other on the bridge of understanding and offer some compassion. So what I'd like to throw your way is, how can women like me support the men in our lives to be able to feel safe, to explore their feelings in a healthy way with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're in an interesting time right now that has the potential to overstep itself for sure. I think that a lot of the virtue signaling that's going on and a lot of the people trying to like compete to be woke in like all these different ways and being really, sensitive, and, you've created a space and asked questions that are, and just knowing you, we're going down this road. And this is, I've done a few podcasts. I've never said this kind of stuff, but you've created that container. But in general, I think that talking about feelings and being open to things like that is important to do in certain arenas, but also just getting things done. And for me as a man, I like to, upon reflection, I'll talk about feelings, but I like to I feel best when I'm getting things done. And I'm not diving into this space of pondering the way I'm feeling all the time. And I think that just the grace that I've been shown in the femininity in my life that's been so amazing and helped me grow the most has been listening and encouraging behavior that you see when men are doing good things, and then just kind of, we're all going to learn. We're all going to go towards grace, and it's going to be, holding on, let go or be dragged kind of thing. And men are so powerful, and we do things, and so many, I think men are locked in these patterns that I can resonate with, of fear, and channeling all that, and channeling that fear into doing things and building. I don't think any of it's bad. I don't think any of the things I've gone through are negative, and I think they're all just part of this human drama. That's great, and it's fun. Or else, why are we here? It's, if it was boring and we were all perfectly meditating and even keel, I don't want to live that life. Maybe I did in another life, and that was so boring. So I've created these dragons to slay, and it's great. It's all great and fun. But I think, in general, that's the grace that women have, and the long-term strength, and being that cushion for men to go and, attain and achieve those bigger goals, and for men to do the same thing for women when they feel called to do that too. I mean, I think there are, men and women are equal in a lot of ways, but it's also important to acknowledge that there are like physical differences, and there are some areas that men are predisposed to being better at. Not everyone, but tend to be. And so I'm a bit traditional in that way too, where it's like, let's let men be men and let women be women if they want to, if they identify that way, and it's like, let's celebrate that too. Let's not throw out that in the need for equality. Let's have equality. Let's celebrate people who want, all different kinds. There's women who are incredible powerhouses, and there's men who are healers and more in their feminine. And that's great. We're in this age where you can be whatever you want to be. But I think, going into those roles and looking at, how historically and how a lot of men, are, and a lot of men are doers, and a lot of men, are most alive when they're powerful, and then they're doing something, and they're chasing and slaying some dragon. I went on a bit of a tangent there, but
no, totally. Yeah, that really resonates for sure. It's so funny. It's so easy to talk to you because I feel like we have all of these different areas of interest that overlap. And just from, our friendship and what I've gotten to know about you, you just have such an array of skills that I'm just learning about. Even we were just talking about, you're like, oh yeah, I make my own kombucha, and I always see that you're into permaculture, and you just have such a variety of gifts and talents. And I was thinking about how many features have you done? 6 feature-length film?
I don't know.
No, a lot. Yeah. But they're all pretty different. I mean, thematically speaking. So do you want to talk about that a little bit, and how you've, over the years, as you zoom out, what made you choose these different topics about the environment or certain groups? How did you get the inspiration in those moments for these films?
Well, they're just me wanting to learn about something. And it's like like this microphone is such an excuse. It's such a container for people to open up, and you have access. For me personally, I can have access to incredible minds, and because I'm sharing a gift that I've cultivated, and then they can share that with me. So it's like, because I never went to college, I can get this custom education around this thesis that I think is something. And usually when I make a film, it's like halfway through it changes, and I'm learning something new about that I didn't know, and the scope of the film changes, but that's the beauty in it. So yeah, I joke with my family, I didn't go to college, but I'm picking different subjects based on films. And that's helped me be around people and travel around the world and learn about different things. And just like you get to, if you're curious, I don't know if I think there's that something, the other side of that though, is that you're not, like, I found myself not being that curious because I'm so curious in my work that when I'm done with that side of things, I tend to kind of go through life dully. Like at the same time, when I did a tour with my last film, I think I did a 65 stop tour in Australia, Hawaii. The film was about Hawaii. It was about regenerative agriculture and how they've been used as an industrial agriculture, genetic modification, chemical spraying model. But anyway, after that tour, I was so antisocial. I had like so little interest in anybody and anything because I had just I probably had conversation with with 1,000 people or 2,000 people, and then saw much more than that. So it's like, I think it being, it's all an ebb and a flow. It's what we choose. I don't think that I've learned more or less than anybody else, but that these films, because I didn't go to college or because I didn't, I don't work in the city, just living in New York, I feel like is the same thing, but I tend to like surfing and being in nature. And so that's what balances me out, I feel like you could just live in Brooklyn or Manhattan and walk around the streets and be open to a conversation and get that same kind of energy. Yeah.
Totally. That's really neat. I'm loving this idea as life as the education, and just being open and surrendering to the experience. Because I think a lot of the time, at least I find this with myself, I can tell when I'm trying to drive the experience. And there's a very real physiological tension I feel in my body when, my breath's a little more shallow and it's, I want this thing to happen and it's not going well, or my Uber's late, or like whatever it is. And you feel that within your body. I think I feel that in life too. And then there's moments where I just go, okay, that's not what I wanted to happen, but this could be cool. Yeah. I'm going to go with this. Yeah.
I'm still learning that. And that's when the magic happens.
Yeah.
Like everything is our fear is like the gatekeeper of the magic, and every time we feel like, okay, I want to close down here. And if you just like push up, for me, if I just push a little further, I'm always like, damn, I'm glad I did that.
The fear is the gatekeeper of the magic. Yes, absolutely. And
not always, right? Sometimes it's good to not push ourselves over the top, but if we feel like we could, I think we should. And we get stronger. That's the thing of like, the other thing there is the self-care aspect of art and then there's the shadow side that we need to be aware of to do good work and sustain good work. I meet a lot of part of my job is working with younger musicians and younger artists. And as a part of Guayaki, Yerba Mate, we have this like side that we nurture young talent. And it's like, always I'll meet young people who have this incredible gifts to share. And part of my thought is like, I hope they can take care of that, and not give away too much energy and let it build slowly, or not let their ego, crave the light too much, but I think that, so there's that side, but then I think we can also slowly, it's just like exercise, it's like if you if you go out and try to run a marathon and you haven't trained, that's actually not going to be good for your body, right? Because you're going to be recovering and sore, and you might sustain, ligament tendon damage for a while. And after 6 months, you're not going to be healthier. But if you build up and you get slowly push your boundaries and then take a little less time for the shadow work, a little less time, then you become stronger and stronger and stronger to where your heart, and we have all those examples about the grandmother, or the woman, the matriarch who spent, in older men too, they have just spent their lives giving so much that they just don't even have to stop and pause because they've just opened themselves up that much. That's the goal, right? And it's just being like, we're still pretty young and on that path to that. But I think it's acknowledging on this that we have not arrived, and we're just sharing where we're at right now. And there's people who are way more advanced and doing that kind of stuff. But acknowledging the fact that you do need to be kind to yourself in trying to get there, if that's the goal, and some people it isn't. But
absolutely. I mean, you just hit the nail on the head of why I started the Thought Room as well, was because we already talked about social media and the focusing on everybody being successful and at the top of their game. And for me, yes, of course, we all want to present like we're doing well, but I really felt like there was a need for a space for me to just be in process, and literally talk it out, think it out with other people who I think are some of the coolest and greatest thought leaders around the world, and just create this space to say what you just said, which is, hey, we're not the experts. We're just all co-creating here. We're all figuring it out. And this worked for me. Maybe there's something in this for you. And that's what this space is. So that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the older I've gotten, the more I realize that every single person you could have a conversation with, and everybody's amazing. Everybody has something to teach you, and nobody's better than anybody else. Certain people are just more motivated through good things or bad things to be louder. And because they're louder, they've learned sometimes how to perfect what they say, and they've learned more, and they've stretched themselves, to have more love and ability to sustain energy for other people, and they've gained success. But I think success is just such a loaded term, especially with the number of go-arounds that I feel like we have at these lives. It's maybe somebody's having a shadow life, or a shadow few lives to be able to really burn bright another life.
And it's so subjective too. I mean, you might say, oh, that person's not successful. Well, but why do you get to choose the standards? Maybe they're a great family person, and that's where they're pouring all of their energy, and they have kids who are thriving and happy, and there's food on the table, and they're working in a humble job. I mean, maybe they feel really successful. So
Totally.
We have these methods of othering. I call it othering, and we effectively create separation between what we're doing and what other people are doing. We put these lenses on things in order to make ourselves feel better about where we're currently at. Because, hey, if they're down there, then that means I'm okay, right? I mean, that's essentially what we're doing. So I think when we create that separation, or we pass judgments on other people, it's really coming from a place deep inside of ourselves that feels not good enough on some level.
Yeah. And even people who don't do anything right, maybe they murder somebody, maybe they do something that in our eyes is horrible, and their whole life, the feeling that they must feel in that, and the level of shame and humiliation and rejection for life in general, probably makes little things really beautiful, because things are dulled with sensation. Sensation becomes dulled. And if you don't have other things that we're so stimulated, I mean, you and I, we have the ability to travel. We have the ability to talk to stimulating people. We have, all of these good feelings. We have phones, and we all have phones, and we're seeing all these things. It's like to be in prison or to be in those spaces, they're experiencing a beauty that could, in my belief system, could be setting them up to come into the world again incredibly grateful for an incredibly ready, open and grateful channel for love to come in. And maybe that was just like prepping the soil, for that. So
yeah, absolutely. I've even had some moments of that in this lifetime where I've come out of a dark period, and I'll then go through a pocket of waking up every day just so jazzed about life. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm alive. Like, I just made it through that thing. I just made it through moving 8 times in 8 weeks. I just made it through living out of a suitcase. I just made it through running my company out of the trunk of my car and living off of $75 a week. I mean, these are all things that I've done in my life. And when you come out the other side, you're just like, nothing can actually touch me though. Like nothing can hurt me. I'm here.
Yeah. It makes a whole, when we acknowledge that suffering and the feelings that brings you, then it's like life is, it's all great, and it's like and our jadedness is our teacher as well as our inspiration. I mean, if the other side of the coin is jadedness, I don't know, what's a better word for that? Inspiration and
like cynicism, or I don't know. Yeah.
Cynicism, that they're both guides that create the wave, the ebb and flow, and taking things for granted is part of that cynicism. And I think we're all trying to fight that, and we're all trying to stay on the upside, which is so futile. It's you can't have one without the other.
Yeah, it's that contrast that makes life so beautiful. Yeah, completely. So you've done so many things, and now you're working with Guayaquil. You're here with the Dome. You guys have been on tour, and you have other cities planned on your tour after this. Where are you going after this?
We're going to do LA for the month of October, and then we're planning out what the tour is going to be like in 2020.
Cool. Amazing. And are you doing Burning Man? No, you did Lightning in a Bottle.
No, we're going to do an event in San Francisco that's associated, I think, with Buckminster Fuller Foundation. And it's like a small planet or something. I'm botching the name, but there's an event in San Francisco in September that we're going to do instead.
Cool. So you're working with Guayaquil, and I was reading, you've worked with so many different really cool, a lot of B Corps, super down to earth brands like Patagonia. You've worked with Adidas, I think, Teva, probably some other ones in there. Your work's been featured in the New York Times and Condé Nast and Scientific American. You've had these incredible peak experiences in your life. And we talked about what it feels like after you come down from those peaks, but are there any moments, like picturesque sort of snapshots in your head that you can conjure up, a moment where you were in it and you had the awareness of, wow, the work like my life right now, if I zoom out, this is pretty fucking incredible. Have you had any moments like that?
Oh, so many. Yeah, where you're just, your hair stands up and you get goosebumps. And that's what I live for, is that inspiration where you disappear. Your desire for sleep or eating or anything that gets strong when you're not doing something, any of this human body stuff, you just become a part of the landscape. You become a part of the people that you're with. I mean, I felt that way in talking, in the last film in Hawaii. It felt like every single trip I would take over there to film, I'd gone over there as a surfer when I was a kid to take waves basically and try to get photos of myself, and the energy was very different. I got it handed to because I was going over there to take, and this was like the energetic red carpet was just like, I really truly feel was laid out. Whenever I would try to shoot, the rain would stop and the rainbow would come out. I mean, when I was tired, I would get these like unexplained just boosts of energy. Yeah, a lot of that stuff happens when I'm in alignment with something that's way greater than myself, and I'm really using, you know, my situation to be of service to something that I personally feel is very important.
I like what you said about alignment. And this is something I've been fine-tuning in different ways. How do you personally tell whether you're, you know, in what we're calling alignment or inspiration? And how can you tell when you're sliding off of it, or as one of my friends likes to say, getting off the exit of the highway, you know, and how do you, one, notice that? And two, what do you do to bring yourself back on?
I don't think I'm the best at it, and I'm going to do some work this year around that. So with that caveat, I feel like there's times when I think I'm getting into alignment, and I think because I've been really perfectionistic with my health and the lifestyle that I've lived and what I'm willing and unwilling to compromise, that I've become too dogmatic, and I'm realizing that a lot of the things that I thought were healthy are potentially pulling me backwards. So that's a really fun mystery to unpack, you know? But yeah,
Can you give a small example of one thing that you were?
Yeah, like I've felt like for a long time that, and it's always changing. And so for the time that I did, it was probably right on. But like if I was traveling, I mean, I was surfing and getting paid to travel and do that. So I was on the road as part of my job for 7-8 months a year, while I was living in my van, creating content, you know, making films, going to surf locations. And then I started working with Guayaquil at the same time, and I was making sort of activist style films about musicians and issues. And so for that period, I would spend a lot of time when I wasn't doing that alone in the desert at this hot spring, unplugged. And that's what I needed. And I think that I became romantically attached to that feeling of clearness and silence and rest, because my life at that time was just inherently so out of a suitcase, so having to be so social and creative, and you know, that rest really held this sacred place. But lately I've taken some time to not be doing as much as I was doing, and I've found that same, like I live now, you know, in a kind of similar situation where I have a hot tub and I don't have to go to the hot springs in my van. I have it all kind of set up at home, and I have this desire to just be there. And it's actually not, and it's interesting coming here. It's like all of a sudden I'm feeling healthier and more connected when I'm around people, because I've gone on the other side of that. And there's a bunch of other things, but you know, things always change, and we're just tapping into those different indicators of what feels good, of what's good and for us and what isn't, is I think one of the greatest mysteries and challenges. And it requires awareness. It requires being aware of our body and how things are flowing, and how our energy is either creating or calling in certain things that we want, or, you know, bad things. This last spring was a really tough time. There was some illness in the family. I had some personal relationship stuff that was going on, and that really changed. I watched that change the way I was interacting with the world. And it was crazy, because for the first time I was getting a whole nother side of the human experience, where like a lot of interactions I was getting, people were like disrespecting me, or it was like I was just being shown a whole nother thing, because I'd realized I was living in a bliss bubble. Like the only people that would come into my life were vibrating on this just like selfless joy, you know, or this creativity. And I was riding this cloud. And then I went into a different energetic field of doubt and shame and fear and alienation, all these things, and sadness for this illness. And it was like I watched myself invite other aspects of people out when they talk to me. Anyway, that's another tangent, but yeah.
I love this tangent. This is something I have been thinking about so much lately, specifically the law of attraction. And I have experienced exactly what you're saying. I have gone weeks where everything was going wrong. I had this one week in the middle of one depression here where a little girl, a little 5-year-old girl I was looking after got lice. So I had to be treated for lice. My apartment was being checked for bed bugs.
Oh my gosh.
Then my car got towed. This is like in a 72-hour period. Like this is all happening all at once. Then I got really sick and was told I was going to have a surgery.
Wow.
In a short period of time. And I know that my energy was in the dumps. Like that was the lens I chose. And so I was walking out into the world too, just viewing everything as out to get me. And that person's this and this person's that, and just putting that out there. And then there have been other weeks where, you know, just everything is flooding in and everything feels like it's going right. And I'm telling myself in my mind, wow, look, everything's going right. Everything's going right. Everything's going right. And that becomes the programming. So it's cool to think that we can actually manipulate the programming, which is, you know, how we're perceiving things through our thoughts, and kind of create a different experience. A lot of people listening to this go, that's crazy. There's just the reality that's happening. You can't change it. But a small example, and I was talking to my brother, Zach, about this yesterday, was, you know, when you're in a good place, say going into a coffee shop, and you feel so grounded, you've had your music in, you're walking down the sidewalk, you're breathing in the air, you're feeling good, you walk into that coffee shop, you look in the barista's eyes and they're like, hi, what can I get you? And they're kind of looking down at the screen, and you tell them, and you're like, how's your day? And then they look up from the screen and they are like, whoa, someone is acknowledging me as a human being right now, my job. And then you have a little exchange, it's playful, now they're smiling, they give you your coffee, and then they're like, hey, here's a cookie, or like, here's a muffin, you know? And you're like, great, thank you. Like, that was so great to meet you. What was your name? See you next time. You walk out. Now you've got a muffin. You put your earbuds back in. Like, and then you just start a track, and it's momentum then. Because then you're like, oh, sweet, I have this muffin. And then you pass this homeless person, and you're like, hey, here's this muffin. Or whatever. It just starts to spiral, and you start to believe that life is beautiful.
I love that so much. Yeah. That is so true. And that is there's a lot of, I think that the funny thing, like manifesting, people talk about that, and this is woo term, but we are pattern makers. Like, we interpret the world in our brain. And when you do things like that, you just, you're making your reality amazing. And that's and it's what you're doing is you're taking care of other people, and you're thinking you're either, whether you're filled up or not, you're taking the time to be of service. And like, that's it.
Yeah. I think there's this innate desire in every human being to be useful and to make life more wonderful for other people. For me personally, it sounds like for you, there's nothing more satisfying than that, just brightening somebody's day, even if it's by 1%. And you just talked about us being creatures of habit and patterning. Part of the reason I wanted to name this the Thought Room too is because I read something that said we have about 68,000 thoughts a day.
Wow.
And 98% of those thoughts are the exact same thoughts you had the day before. 98%. I mean, that's a big percentage. So here we are thinking we're waking up having all these unique experiences throughout the day, and all these different things are happening to us, but our thoughts are pretty much on autopilot. And that's, the weight of that, the immensity of that, to just sit with for a second and think, wow, I'm thinking 98% of the same
that is crazy
things as yesterday, and 98% of the same like vibration. We'll call it vibration, energy, whatever you want to call it. But basically what I'm saying is, if you were in a negative space yesterday, you're probably also in a negative space today, and you'll probably be in a negative space tomorrow unless you exercise this muscle, right? And this is mindfulness, and this is the process of becoming aware of what you're thinking when you're thinking it, and then deciding in that moment, is this what I want to be thinking? Is this what I want to be feeling? If not, let me choose a different, we'll call it a lens, a different pair of glasses to put on about this event that's currently unfolding in front of me. So it's a process of really cleaning your thoughts, putting your mind through the washing machine spin cycle over the course of, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes days and weeks and months to subtly retrain and kind of rewire these neural pathways and create a very tangibly real new sense of life and a new experience.
Well, it's so beautiful. What you're saying is so beautiful, because I think so many people, at the end of the day, they don't push themselves. They're happy enough, and they're pushed. And it's like, okay, I'm okay with some people being whatever you want to call them, like a shithead, or like this person's an asshole or an idiot, or whatever these derogatory things we name parts of our life. And that's just how it is, that's our story. And yet we realize that we can't do things the way we used to do them anymore. And we call things, the environment, or there's these big out there things that aren't connected to us. But like the revolution, I think, that needs to happen in myself, I'm just speaking about my own self, is like, I need to start realizing that what's okay for me isn't okay for the future generations. Like, we need to regenerate this place. We need to regenerate the culture. We need to regenerate, goodness in the world that makes people care about things bigger than themselves, or things about just being okay. Because things being okay right now, our status quo is like not looking good. So that's inspiring to hear, what you just said about that's, my mindfulness has come from being able to surf or being able to hike and having these like privileged sort of isolating kind of things that I do. And I tend to kind of think, when I'm going to go into the city, or I'm going to be around a lot of people, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be good and bad and everything. But what you just described it's another way. It's a way of taking control of reality and making it a better place. And hopefully that if that goes viral, if that kind of thought and those kinds of gestures, that's gonna that's gonna create a lot of really amazing stuff. So
yeah, I've heard this repeated over and over from some great spiritual leaders and also some mentors of mine, seeing the excitement that I have for this kind of work and looking me in the eye and saying, you want to heal the world, Hallie, start with yourself. Start with yourself. If we all just start with ourselves, that's where the power is, because you get a room full of healed people who know exactly what their childhood traumas were. They know exactly how they were covering things up. They've fine-tuned their ability to communicate with nonviolent communication, and they've done the work. That's a powerful room. And then that room, can come up with creative things. And then that room becomes a building, and then a city, and then it becomes, countries full of people who are all vibrating in this space and who are filled up. They're filled up, they're healed within themselves. So they have that more to give. We're no longer operating from a place of lack, and we can shift our focus from our own selves, the ego, and our individual survival, to now broadening the focus and zooming out and thinking about our planet Earth.
Yeah, and to ground that, it would be interesting to see how that comes to life. But it feels like right now we're in this place that's the scary thing for me, is that I think that a lot of people are being manipulated by politics and media, and a lot of it's just the algorithms themselves inherent. But it's our idea. You have urban people who have profited largely from globalism, and basically a lot of cities where people are creating marketing around things made in China or other places. And so the good parts of that are multiculturalism, open-mindedness, and that's kind of the liberal doctrine. And then you have conservatives who've it's more or less red state, blue state. It's more like red county, blue county. and the more rural people. And those are the people that in the past have been the producers of a lot of things that have been outsourced. And so their strengths are like community values, like taking care of each other, tradition in the form of religion. But really, you go to a lot of small towns and people are really kind. I mean, the stuff we're talking about, they do that. They know how to say hi to the person at wherever they're getting their morning coffee or at the diner. They all know each other. They all care. They all have this, this lack of connection that we have in cities is kind of what you're talking about, like that healing, the liberal, that kind of side. But it's like, if we can figure out how to see past, and so, but conservatives, back to the conservatives are being, Trump, what he does is he's appealing to this side that has been disenfranchised for a long time. Like the liberal side has been really doing well from globalism. And yet it's that globalism's caused a lot of the environmental problems that we're not talking about because of the supply chain, to get things from all over the world and to create these marketing of products that, you could argue we don't need. Like we both have, blood in our hands. We all do. And the political systems play on the disenfranchisement. And the reason why Trump is doing so well is there's more disenfranchised people in a lot of this, Rust Belt and all these areas where people are living in trailer parks and they haven't been participators in this new economy and this information age and this creative economy. And you have them there being stoked up by, this over the liberal thing where they're being taught, they in a small town, when people say they're Satan worshipers or they say they're homosexuals or whatever, that's like, that scares their little fabric of how they do things. So that's what's motivating them. And for us to call them racists and to call them, that's how we're divided. But at the end of the day, what both sides aren't talking about is the rise of corporate power to the extent that they're not paying taxes, that they're not like giving back, that they're not being held accountable for all the externalities of their business. And we're all buying into that because we want to, but like, so how do we, this personalizing of the experience and treating people kindly, I would really like to use this time to talk about like, how can we humanize these people that we think are others in our country right now that we have talked about as negative, and realizing that that's what's going on. People from small town America who are, the reason why Trump, a lot of the reason he got elected is because he talked about draining the swamp. Has he? No, nobody's ever going to do it unless we really stand up for it, and Hillary or, maybe Bernie will, but who knows? He's going to have so many roadblocks because it's just so ingrained in the system, this lobbying and all these, the power and influence of corporations that they have. And I'm not saying corporations are bad, but I think there needs to be, if we're not, we need to, as consumers, first of all, not villainize each other over bullshit social issues, and then also support companies and inspire each other to live lower impact lifestyles through fun, but I think that's like with the energy that you're talking about, those need to be, as far as what I've learned and seen, that needs to be the arrow. And the biggest blind spot of those arrows are people villainizing people in our own country. If we can get beyond that, I think our kids have a chance, our future generations have a chance. If not, and that's why I'm here. I feel like if I can, whatever I can do,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because
the fact that climate change has been politicized, whatever it is, is we are, if you don't believe in climate change, the fact that we're cutting down, we're destroying so much, we have destroyed so much biomass, so many ecosystems, so many species, and to be able to, everybody, anybody who farms, anybody who hunts, like to think about those ecosystems and to think about bringing them back into balance. That should be everybody's goal, because we're growing, our populations are growing, and yeah. Rant.
Incredible. And this actually ties well into the work that you're now doing with the company you've started, Manda, right? And so you want to talk a little bit about that and how you're operating it as a conscious business and how you I guess, what was the inspiration behind it and the impact that you're hoping that it will have?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you've heard about what the FDA just did, but they, all the ingredients in chemical sunscreens were passed in the 70s and 80s when it was assumed that they were topical, so they were never tested internally on humans. And the FDA had a self-published study that showed that the chemicals in sunscreens enter in your bloodstream within 24 hours of application, which is common sense, right? What you put on your skin, you end up going in your body, but that wasn't how things were legalized. And so they've admitted now that, and they basically said that we cannot say that any mainstream sunscreens are safe. Any chemical sunscreens, the ones we all grew up with, could potentially be hazardous, and we need to do more testing. So, you know, it's a great time to have 3 years ago started an organic food grade 50 SPF sunscreen. And my dad, you know, had skin cancer, pretty serious bout with it. And I started making my own about 12 years ago. And I had my friends, and we just perfected the formula. And we have a paste and a body cream and an after sun, like a salve. And it's simple, and we try to do the best we can, try to make the best product we can. We've made it for surfers. It goes on, stays on. Our challenge is educating people that you need to be able to see your sunscreen for it to work. You know, we tint it so that it blends in, and we're coming out with more tints for different color types, but skin types.
So why is that? Why is that you need to be able to see it?
Well, because the chemical sunscreens, like the reason they started was because people were conscious of having like a film on their body, and the chemicals, the way the chemical sunscreens work is they soak into your bloodstream, and then they render the UVAs inert, or they break them down and they dissipate them as heat. But that actually isn't that effective in a lot of areas, and the only ways that we've really gotten it down is like having something that physically sits on top of your skin and lessens the amount of exposure to UV rays that you have, and also moisturizes at the same time. So like any good sunblock, and the FDA said this, the only thing that they can say is safe are mineral-based sunscreens, so zinc and titanium dioxide, and not nano, because if they're nano, there's like a lot of misinformation around sunscreens being invisible, like invisible mineral sunscreens. Those are sometimes nano, and they get inside, the zinc particles get inside your skin, which is not great. And also, it's very simple. It's so simple. You just need to see it. That's how it works. Yeah, so we're having a good time, and we try to do our packaging, you know, in a really the best way that we can, the most responsible way we can. And things are going good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's really cool. So what are the main ingredients in it? Is it zinc that you use?
Yeah, it's zinc, and then it's just like beeswax and we use cacao powder for a tint, and yeah, it's shea butter and things like that.
Yeah,
it's like very few ingredients. They're all food grade. Like even zinc oxide, they have zinc supplements you can take, and it's the same kind of form. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I'm constantly in a process of cleaning out the products that I'm using. I've been using a zinc sunscreen for a while now. Definitely going to try yours now, but everything from, you know, the shampoos to definitely the toothpaste that we're using, and just reading articles about, you know, decalcifying the pineal gland and you know, choosing a natural toothpaste, and the toothbrushes and the impact that all of this has. I mean, it can be pretty overwhelming for people, I think, when we're first starting, but I think that it's an important conversation to open up, just an awareness of, you know, why are you so conscious about the food you put in your body, but you're not conscious maybe so much of the things you're putting on your body, whether it's your skin cream, your sunscreen, your chapstick, the gum you're chewing. Have you looked at, you know, like those kinds of things? It's, again, going back to the creatures of habit and patterning. We maybe thought about it the first time. We thought about the first time we chose a sunscreen or a lip balm or a gum. We're like, is this healthy? I'll look at it the back. Once we've made that decision, we don't often go back and revisit that same thing. We've just accepted it as a law of sorts, and it's a belief, right? And I've heard this phrase repeated a couple times. I think it was Esther Hicks who said this, but a belief is just a thought that's been repeated over and over and over. So you can literally change your belief about anything if you just repeat a different thought. So it's just kind of important to be aware and be looking at these things over and over again and just checking yourself and kind of having a new take on each day. Notice things you didn't notice about the day before.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up, I would love you to tell us where people can find you, where they can connect with you online, and any other offerings or things that you're working on that people can keep an eye out for.
Thanks. Yeah. So I mostly use Instagram, and it's just my name, Cyrus Sutton. And then Manda, the sunscreen company, is mandanaturals.com, or just at Manda, Manda at Instagram. And that's about it. Guayaquil, we're working on a website, and it's out, and we have a lot of great exclusive content with artists and musicians and people who are regenerating the planet in their own ways, called Come to Life, cometolife.com. So yeah, thanks.
Cyrus, thank you so much for hanging with me in the thought room today, and it's been so great to have you here in Brooklyn with your film, and I really appreciate it. Really appreciate having you here.
Thank you, Hallie. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, take care.